Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today I wanted to talk about why I'm worried about the future of the internet. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, a week ago, a little over a week ago, I made a video where I talked about, TikTok basically being banned, TikTok banned for government workers and everything. And generally, I'm okay with that. I'm cool. I think it's totally awesome for any government employee, any work employee to be restricted from accessing social media services on their work devices, okay? If you disagree with that, I want to ask you why. Now, of course, one of the things that has me worried are some of the new laws that have sort of been kicking up. Now, I know while a lot of people have been talking about goofy shit on the internet, I'm somebody that's terribly scared and worried about where the internet can go into the future when it comes to countries divvying up everyone for themselves. Now, we have borders around us. You can't cross into certain countries without letting, federal governments know. Obviously, you can't just enter countries willy-nilly. I mean, you can, but it's illegal if you don't have visas and whatnot. Now, when it comes to the internet, which I believe is the last bastion of true freedom, if you're living in a free society, you can access whatever information you want from any part of the world. When I live in Canada, as bad as things get, when I live in the United States, as bad as things could ever get, I fully know that I can go to any website in the world, I can use any app that I want to. Now, there are restrictions in place. If you browse illegal material on the internet, no matter where you go, you will be hunted down and you will face the long arm of the law. If you run a slavery website on the internet, okay, no matter where you live, if you live in any jurisdiction, they will find out where you're running your human trafficking slavery site, shut you down, and put you behind bars. Obviously, I think we have a pretty good grasp on stopping illegal activities from the internet, even things like the dark web. We have a pretty good grasp at stopping illicit activities. Now, when it comes to browsing other countries and browsing social media services, I want to tell you about the Great Firewall of China. You've probably heard about this term, but to pretty much explain what it is, the Chinese government spends a lot of money basically digging into all of their internet service providers and basically checks everyone's packets, their TCP packets, flying around on the internet in their home country. And if you're Googling for things like Tiananmen Square massacre, or if you're trying to go to youtube.com, Facebook, Google, any place where you could search for free information, the Chinese government restricts you from accessing it. Now, on a country level, when you directly can tell the internet service provider, which is the company me and you go to when we want to buy internet access, so for me, it would be something like Rogers, it would be something like Bell in Canada. For you in America, it would be something like Charter Internet, Verizon, AT&T, whatever. Your internet service provider, wherever you go to, you purchase your internet from them. And basically, if you think about it, they have the end-all be-all for what you can access on the internet. At an ISP level, if they want to restrict you from accessing certain websites, they absolutely could. All right, they can prevent you from resolving to other internet service providers, okay, or other websites, whatever is in their domain. Now, most services don't do that because it would absolutely be bad press and you would just switch to another service provider if your main service provider was outright censoring you. So, of course, there are ways around this. You could use VPNs, you could use different DNSs, you could do a litany of different things to bypass all of these issues. But the point is, when the government gets involved and regulation gets involved and governments can decide to ban whatever they want to, that's when it gets kind of scary. Now, before we jump into it, we have to watch a few videos by some pretty important individuals, okay? Now, if you want to look at it, this is the FBI directors and US senators basically confirming about China's TikTok and how it can control software of millions of devices, control data on millions of US users, and drive narratives to divide Americans. Let's listen to this real quickly.
Yes. Could they use it to control the software on millions of devices given the opportunity to do so?
Yes.
Could they use it to drive narratives, like to divide Americans against each other? For example, let's say China wants to invade Taiwan, to make sure that Americans are seeing videos arguing why Taiwan belongs to China and why the U.S. should not intervene?
Yes.
Now, of course, that's all true. Any company with any app can do whatever they want. I think the important idea here is obviously when they're referring to TikTok, they're getting into points about election fraud, right? Of things like convincing people or sending out propaganda. If you ever played games like Metal Gear Solid 2, if you remember the infamous ending, I Need Scissors 61, whatever, it was actually such a great parallel to the world we live in nowadays, where there was such an overabundance of data, and basically artificial intelligences would use algorithms to control what you and I got to see. Now, of course, Could you imagine the ramifications of having another external country, a foreign country, send out whatever they want through algorithms on its app to, users of another country? You could affect things like elections. You could affect things like, the general feel of like certain topics, right? You could propagandize users from a whole separate country, which is absolutely scary. And it's something that is now being brought up in today's day of the internet. And of course, obviously it continues. Let's listen further.
It's probably one of the most valuable surveillance tools on the planet. I mean, if we went out and decided to build something like this of our own to influence or spy on another society, I'm not sure we could build something like this, or even better. We've invited them in and protected them by our laws. So I don't understand why this company is allowed to operate as long as it's owned. It's my understanding, and maybe Director Haynes, you can clarify this, but I think this is the case. Under Chinese law, any company, I don't care what the company is in China, that the Chinese government says, give me everything you have, they have no choice but to give it to them, or someone else will be in charge.
So what he means by that is absolutely true. Whenever China enters any other country, they're usually protected by free laws, all right? Remember last week when the Chinese were like, it's a gross abuse of state power, yet their country absolutely bans any foreign app from entering their company or country or doing whatever they want. And yes, it's true. If you're a CEO in China and you refuse to hand over data to the Chinese government based on whatever national security law they choose to enact, yeah, you'll be sacked, probably shipped off to a fucking gulag and killed. That's just how mafia works over there, okay? Literally, the government is in fact the mafia. I mean, it's a mafia everywhere, but over there, they're pretty goddamn overt about it.
TikTok operates in China versus the U.S. For example, in the U.S., kids are being encouraged to choke themselves out. We've had kids die in China. They're encouraged to focus on math and science and building the country. Is that an example of how two different versions of TikTok, one feeding our society poison and the other inculcating positive values, an example of how potentially or in reality TikTok could be used to damage our country?
I think those are among many sort of telling indicators that we should be looking at in assessing the national.
So what he's talking about are TikTok trends that, things like carjackings, obviously choking yourself out, kicking open doors, breaking and entering, whatever you want to call it. All those stupid TikTok trends are true. They trend over here all the time. And if you ever look at Douyin in China, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, yes, TikTok is also banned in China, all right? The external facing application, you can't use that back home. You can use Douyin, however, which absolutely provides you good, wholesome, halal family materials for any child over there. I believe they even also have to deal with child, like you can only use it for like certain hours of the day, but they're also kind of enacting that over here too. Yeah, Douyin is an interesting app. Over there, their algorithms are totally different, and yes, they do promote wholesome family values, which I think is really interesting considering the fact that, yes, do I believe the conspiracy of TikTok dumbing down our society? I think all social media is designed to dumb down our society. So now, the Deterring America's Technology Adversaries Act is an actual scary bill, and I wanted to read a few things about it too. So for one of them, they obviously focus on things like election interference, which we just talked about. Obviously, any tool that is from the outside can abuse its algorithms and feed you what you want to hear. If the Chinese wanted one political party brought into the country, they could obviously modify their algorithm so it just pushes more of one political party. It's not about like hitting the people that are going to vote one side or the other anyways. Those are always guaranteed to be specifically one side or the other. They're going for like people who are swingers, people who could choose to vote one or the other. And obviously, well, that's weird. And obviously, for them, they can choose to alter the algorithm so they can radicalize people towards whatever side they wish. That's true. Obviously, that's a thing. And for now, that's something that any country is going to be afraid of. It's not just the United States. It could be Russia. It could be China. It could be any country that's worried that foreign powers could influence their people. It's not hard for any tech company to make a social media app, have it kick off with like near infinite money, and then, of course, utilize that application to affect people on a global scale. Now, according to this bill, they obviously talk about not just the United States, but they're talking about any country that they have a treaty with. So obviously Canadians, they've got it with certain countries in Asia, so on and so forth. And what they specifically mention are people in the United States, permanent residents, whatever. Now, of course, when you get into it, the president shall impose the sanction described in 202. With respect for any foreign person that on or after the date of the enactment of this act knowingly operates, directs, and otherwise deals in a connected software application that is subject to the jurisdiction or direction of directly or indirectly operating on behalf of China, or is owned by, directly or indirectly controlled by, or otherwise subject to the influence of China. Now, this is actually a super important section that freaks me out too. It's not just TikTok that they're specifically going for. That was the catalyst that made these guys look into it. No, this could actually include any application that is invested in by Chinese authorities. So it could even be, as far as my understanding of this law going, possibly games like Valorant, all right? Games where they have anti-cheats like Vanguard that are built at the kernel level, where like literally your entire computer is goat seed to anybody in the PRC if they chose to hand over the data over there. Now, of course, there are laws around these things. I don't think that the Chinese government would use games like Valorant to spy on you, but the possibilities are always there. And the law here is written so vague that it doesn't just stop at TikTok. It could be any application that has investments in, even partially by the Chinese government. When Tencent goes on a buying spree, this could potentially affect games that are owned partially or wholly by Tencent, which obviously would have to hand over its data to the Chinese government if compelled. Now, of course, it doesn't just stop at games. It could be literally any application that serves as a literally connected software application. That is such a vague term, it's not even funny. So, of course, reasonably believed to have facilitated or maybe facilitating China's military intelligence, espionage activities, censorship activities, and surveillance activities. So the surveillance activities is so vague, it could literally be anything. Like the FBI could say that, yeah, this app is spying on American citizens and taking away their data, therefore shut it down. And of course, this bill doesn't just affect the government, it could affect the entire country as a whole. The sanction described in this section is the exercise of all powers granted to the president by the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, shall, to the extent necessary, to block and prohibit all transactions in all property and interest in property of any foreign person or an agency or instrumentality of a foreign state, as the case may be, if such property and interests in property are in the United States, come within the United States, or are come within the possession or control of a United States person. Now, obviously, you've probably noticed that even if you're in a university, they do ban the use of TikTok or any of these applications, simply because when you're a part of a university, obviously there's a government involvement, so you do have to use your own network services to do that. If you're in a university and you're wondering why I can't use TikTok, don't use the school's Wi-Fi, don't use the school's network, then you're allowed to do whatever you want. Now, the point is, the reason I'm bringing all of this up is it does serve as a scary moment for the future. We're reaching a point where there is genuine fear of actual countries spying on you. And the one answer that we have is literally start drawing battle lines. And it doesn't just end in the United States. It doesn't just end in Russia or China. Literally in like 10 years, I could imagine the internet starting to ban foreign applications. And when they ban them, they just create their own for their own specific populations. You know, at the worst case scenario, it literally might be a world where we're actually segregated on the internet and we're not free anymore. Could you imagine if tomorrow Iran makes an amazing social media application? If you think for a second that doesn't get banned day one in the United States, you would be surprised. It would get banned because they would immediately assume that there's actual spying of US citizens, election fraud, you name it, that's happening. So there's obviously a lot of fears, and I think they're legitimate fears. But I think a lot of this backlash in these bills have really kicked up in response to the United States not being the central leader in tech anymore. Obviously, there are other countries that have proven that they can make social media applications that are as popular as the ones we make here. China with TikTok, and tomorrow it could be India, and the next day it could be Russia, and the next day it could be Israel, it could be any other country out there that creates the next big TikTok. And the more and more that this happens, the more and more fear it puts in the eyes of a lot of these alphabet organizations in the US anyways. I don't think for a second the FBI cares so much about the China spying on the US citizens as much as they're sad that they're not the only ones spying on their own people. If these laws were implemented the right way, in my opinion, I think they would probably be looking more for data protection laws in regards to what we have on our devices. I think what's really scary going forward is the lack of privacy we're getting on modern day smartphones. Now, obviously, Apple's pretty decent, Android's getting better, but every day I really wish a lot of these companies and organizations were mandated to provide the best privacy features imaginable. Because even if you use Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, a lot of these these apps will spy on you. And it really needs to be a situation where you are allowed to give up your data depending on what it is. You shouldn't be allowed to give up everything. You should be allowed to pick very granularly what you're giving up to these companies. Because what we've learned is with companies like Facebook and TikTok, as soon as you let them into your phone just a little bit, they will take a mile's worth of data. You can give them an inch of permissions, they will take a mile's worth of your information and run off with it, which is the scariest aspect. And that's one thing I wish these laws kind of targeted. Now, of course, a lot of countries have come up with laws. Obviously, Canada's come up with their own. The European Union as a whole has come up with some of the most stringent data protection laws, and I really wish we focused on that aspect too. I think focusing on banning other applications and other countries from entering our waters is kind of heavy-handed. And obviously, I think the thing that scares me going forward is the internet going to be segregated 10 years from now? Are we going to be a point where even if we are one of the freest places to live, are we going to have complete free and open internet access? Or are things like Tor and the deep web going to become more and more important, given the fact that with these laws passing, we might be in a world where we're unable to download whatever social media application that we truly want? I think it's scary, and I also kind of wonder how it could even be enforced, right? Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to go to the internet service providers, or are they going to make our own version of a great firewall to prevent any access or any use of this tool? And at that point, are VPNs going to be like the thing of the future, or like the thing that we absolutely need, just so we can actually operate the internet completely free? But even that gets kind of confusing. Imagine VPNing to like Russia, for instance, and then having to deal with their censorship issues, or vice versa, whatever you want to name it. It's a wild situation, and honestly, seeing it enforced is going to be a tough ask. But to see the start of the internet, especially in 2023, the bingo card, when I had to check off, the laws, us passing laws to prevent access from other companies' applications, foreign companies, was not something I expected. Now, is it something that I definitely have sympathy to TikTok for? Absolutely not. In my opinion, if China bans our applications from their side, I'm totally okay with banning theirs. But it is a scary world to envision going forward, that like as this stuff gets more popular and as every country starts to make their big strides in the tech field, are we slowly going to be like segregating ourselves away just because we're scared that other countries can absolutely realistically spy on us or affect our actual processes? That's something that I wanted to ask about. That's something I want to talk about and get off my chest. I'm sorry, I live in kind of some weird censorship-like fear going on into the future. I really do. It's probably already here, but listen, as somebody that believes the internet is the last bastion in true freedom, I really don't want it to be something that ends up becoming really regulated and really segregated going forward. I think that'll absolutely ruin it for me. But hey, who knows, man? I mean, we live in the world of Metal Gear Solid 2, so who fucking knows what's gonna go on going forward? Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.